Flu season is ramping up early. The CDC says 60% of the country has some level of flu activity, and that's unusually high for this time of year.
The Army's top germ lab was abruptly shut down.
Tonight, the CDC trying to extinguish the health emergency linked to e-cigarettes until it figures out why so many people are getting serious lung injuries.
This year, even before peak season, 30 states are reporting a higher number of flu cases than at the same point last year or even for the last 10 years.
In historic Frederick, Maryland, are the biological warfare laboratories. Volunteers were a picked group to expose a person to a biological aerosol.
大家好, I'm Nathan Rich, aka 火锅大王. Recently, there's been a lot of increased interest in the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, more commonly referred to simply as Fort Detrick, after the location of the bioweapons laboratory. You see, it was shut down for failing to meet containment protocols back in August of 2019. I made a video discussing a conspiracy theory about Fort Detrick having created the COVID-19 virus back in March of 2020. Contrary to some willfully ignorant reports that I was promoting a conspiracy theory, I clearly spelled out my conclusion.
The facts that I see tell me that this is very interesting, it's a fascinating idea, the evidence isn't strong enough. And so to me it seems like this outbreak either started in Hubei or it started with someone who came to Hubei, but we would really need to find evidence for that.
That's right, we will never be able to confirm a conspiracy theory like this without access to Fort Detrick, autopsy reports from people who died from vaping illness around that time, and autopsy reports from the elderly citizens who died from one of the two mystery respiratory illnesses that cause pneumonia right in the vicinity of Fort Detrick, exactly at the moment vaping illness cases skyrocketed in the US. Those are what is needed to confirm a conspiracy theory or cover-up of this magnitude. So to all you little weasels writing hit pieces on how I'm a conspiracy theorist, get this through your head. We are examining facts. I am not willing to believe this myself until we have this hard proof. If you haven't seen the other video, go watch it now. Most of it still holds up. Seriously, I know nobody likes to go watch another video and come back, but go watch the other video and come back. But since I released the last video, a lot more circumstantial evidence has come to light, and that's what I'd like to tell you about today. But I mean, come on, Nathan. If COVID-19 had started in the United States in 2019, there would have been like 1 million cases by January 2020, right? Well, sorry to disappoint you all, but there wasn't 1 million COVID-19 cases in America by January 2020. There were 5 million by December 2019. In the last video, I revealed how the US military had advertised in May 2019 a contract for developing SARS-CoV resistance via something called small molecule inhibitors. Fort Detrick, meanwhile, was repeatedly hiring animal caretakers, showing they have animals in the facility. In June 2019, the CDC inspects Fort Detrick to find they have not been following protocols about containment. In July, the US military SARS-CoV contract was abruptly canceled. And at the same time this was happening, a mystery respiratory disease that causes pneumonia was discovered in an elderly home near Fort Detrick. Vaping illness clusters started being reported around the country, the first ever reported. The United Kingdom and most other vape-heavy nations reported that they did not experience any outbreak of vaping illness, by the way. Meanwhile, the elderly began dying from their mystery disease. By the middle of July, another separate mystery respiratory disease that causes pneumonia was discovered in a different elderly home near Fort Detrick, and elderly people began dying from that as well. Meanwhile, the lab at Fort Detrick is mostly shut down. The CDC then declared both of those elderly homes' diseases were simply the common cold. In August, the first ever death from vaping illness is reported, and Event 201 is announced, a convention to discuss a pandemic's economic impact. Literally the day the US starts tracking seasonal flu, vaping illness numbers start a steep decline. Maryland, location of Fort Detrick, for the first time in many years becomes the very first state in the US with widespread flu activity. The Wuhan Military Games, an event with many countries' participants, happens in Wuhan, October 2019, as well as Event 201 in New York. Maryland begins reporting deaths from pneumonia, and its flu metrics are red across the board. December 1st, 2019 is the first known case inside of China, a person who had absolutely no exposure to the infamous wet market. Yet to this day, people still talk about the wet market as if it's relevant. So the timeline seems pretty clear to the skeptic. Everything I just said is irrelevant except for the first case, December 1st, 2019. Yep. Wuhan, China, origin of the virus. But now we know this isn't the case at all. As I covered briefly in another video from my YouTube live streams, the United States' first case was before December 1st. It was before the first known case in China. But that's not according to me, dear viewer. That's according to the United States government. You probably didn't know this because it was very quietly reported on, with headlines like, "Coronavirus was in US weeks earlier than previously known," study says, instead of the actual most important fact of the enormous timeline change. The study, performed by US government employees, examined 7,389 blood donations given from December 13th, 2019 through January 17th, 2020 from 9 US states. They found all 9 states showed COVID-19 antibodies, and that, quote, SARS-CoV-2 reactive antibodies were detected in 106 specimens, a small percentage of blood donations from California, Oregon, and Washington as early as December 13th through 16th, 2019. That's over 1.4% of the population with antibodies for COVID-19 as early as December 13th, 2019. Given that it takes around 2 weeks for these antibodies to form, that means that December 1st, 2019, when we know China had at least one single